Coming to paperback and e-readers everywhere, East-themed horror of the Hyena Woman. Hell's aspiring angel takes on a wicked werewoman in this action-packed, all-new East-themed series adventure. Pre-order your copy of East-themed horror of the Hyena Woman on Amazon.com today. One of the reasons why many comic publishers cannot get the high number of sales they did back in the 90s or even the late 80s is because there is no relationship between the publisher and the reader. And in order to go out here and generate high volumes of sales, there has to be a relationship between the reader and the publisher. Unfortunately, many in editorial over the last 20 years have not learned how to foster a relationship between themselves and the reader, and this has had a negative impact on sales. Now, in order to foster a relationship between the reader and the publisher, what a publisher has to do is earn the reader's trust. And in the comic book business, a lot of publishers have not really worked towards fostering a trust between themselves and the reader, and because they don't foster that trust between themselves and the reader, this is one of the things that winds up impeding sales. Now, in order to go out here and sell a book, whether it be a comic book, a novel, or a children's book, you have to go out here and build word of mouth. Now, most books are sold through word of mouth, and that is where a friend tells another friend that this book is great, and you need to go out here and pick up that book. Unfortunately, these days, because so many comic publishers out here don't know how to foster trust, when that reader goes to the store, they don't really have any sort of consistency to let them know that this book is going to be there when they go out here and pick up a first issue, or they go out here and pick up a next issue. And in many cases, when they try to go pick up back issues, they don't know whether or not things are going to remain consistent. Now, it's that consistency that is one of the glues that holds the whole comic book industry together, because if you don't have consistency, you cannot go out here and build momentum on the word of mouth. Because if your books are consistent and your characters are consistent, when you generate the word of mouth, the reader has the incentive to go out here because they can trust that everything is going to remain the same. And because everything is going to remain the same, they know they can trust that when they go out here and pick up that issue of a comic, they can go out here and pick up the next month's issue, or they can go search the back issues because they know that this series is going to remain in print. And because the series is going to remain in print, they have an incentive to go pick up the next issue or the back issues, and that is the glue that holds together your sales, because the reader can trust that the character is going to remain consistent in their ongoing publication, and they trust that the model for the story is going to remain consistent and the character is going to remain consistent. Now, yes, many of these characters do change, develop, and grow in their stories, but there are certain elements that remain the same with these characters, whether it be their personality, their voice, or their story paradigm. And because their personality, voice, and story paradigm don't change, this is what gives the reader incentive to go pick up the next issue, and it gives them incentive to pick up the back issue. And it also gives those new readers an incentive to come in because they can trust that everything is going to remain in place. And that is how you go out here again and build and generate that momentum, because people can trust that the character in the universe that they're in will be the same. But these days, it's hard for a reader to go out here and buy comic books because they can't trust anything at all. And the reason why they can't trust anything at all is because we have editorial that is constantly changing core parts of the structure. And because they change core parts of the structure, people can't really trust that anything is going to be stable. Now, we've seen the destabilization of Marvel Comics in 2001 with their editorial practically not knowing what to do with the characters after these superstars like Kurt Busiek and George Perez and many others left after the Heroes Return relaunch. And in 2002, when your inexperienced Dan Didio took over DC Comics, he then implemented a whole host of changes to DC's universe structure. And as a result, both of the big two have suffered as related to the trust between themselves and the reader. And because they have gone out here and not really catered to the reader's needs, the relationship between your comic publisher and the readers have become strained. And it became further strained over at DC Comics when your Dan Didio continued to express contempt for readers by going out here and killing many of people's favorite characters. And he also went out here and expressed contempt for readers' favorite characters by having them done all sorts of ways that really hurt a lot of the readers' feelings as related to these characters, because a lot of readers formed relationships with these characters, and these characters became friends to a lot of readers. And a lot of readers did not want to see their friends going through all of these miserable times, because many readers went to pick up these characters to escape from their personal lives. And the thing is, DC took away that escape from the reader, and it also, when they did that, they further strained the relationship between the reader and the publisher, because people wanted to be able to trust and believe that these characters would always be theirs for them, and they took away their friend and they took away an escape for the reader. It is very similar to what happened in 1986 with Transformers the movie. A generation of latchkey kids formed relationships with characters like Optimus Prime, Ironhide, Starscream, and Megatron, but your Hasbro wanted to pick up a new generation of toy buyers, and they decided to kill off many of the G1 characters that were on the Ark and replace them with new characters. Unfortunately, because Hasbro underestimated the connection between the readers and the characters, Transformers the movie wound up flopping at the box office, and the Transformers brand wound up suffering for 9 years until Beast Wars came along and revived the brand. And what this showed was that when you break the trust between the customer and the business, people don't want to buy the product. And that's what's really happened over at your Marvel Comics and your DC Comics. Many of the readers, because there was a trust broken between them and the publisher, they have lost all faith in the publisher. And because they don't have any faith in the publisher, they have no reason to go out here and buy the comics. So it is very important for a publisher to go out here and understand how important their relationship is with the reader, because if you don't understand how important your relationship is with the reader, you're going to wind up losing those readers, and those readers have no incentive to come back because they can't trust you to go out here and create a quality publication that remains true to the source material, remains consistent from issue to issue, and gives the reader that escape that they want. They don't trust the publisher, and because they don't trust the publisher, they don't want to pick up the books, nor do they want to spread word of mouth about the books. Now, the solution for all of this problem is to try to re-establish trust. Unfortunately, most of your corporations like your Disney and your Discovery don't really understand the importance of fostering that relationship, and they're not interested in building that relationship, because as corporations, these aren't characters to these corporations. They're just intellectual properties, but because they see them as intellectual properties, they don't see the people that have relationships with these characters or what these characters mean to people. And if you're running a comic book company, you really need to understand that when you create these characters mean something to people. And the reason why they're reading these characters is because as they're escaping in this fantasy world, they are forming relationships with these characters, and these characters are friends to the reader. That is something a good publisher understands and a good editor understands. They understand how important these characters are to people, and they understand that if they want to generate that word of mouth that generates sales, they have to go out here and foster that relationship with the reader. And by fostering that relationship with the reader, you can go out here and earn their trust. And once you earn their trust, they will go out here and spread the word of mouth that will allow you to generate sales with new readers. So trust is very important in the comic book business. Unfortunately, many in editorial, they are so caught up in what they want, they're not thinking about what the customer wants, and they're not thinking about taking the time to sit down and talk to the customer to find out what the customer wants. And that's what any other good business person does. They sit down and listen to the customer because they understand that it's the customer's money that is being spent, and you want to give the customer exactly what they want. Like here at SJS Direct, sometimes people will ask me for different books. Like one viewer asked me about what happened between Spellbound and Spinsterella and Matilda Crowley's life, and I wrote the entire book, The Legendary Mad Matilda, on that request. And I've had other viewers ask me about certain stories, and I would tell them what happened in those stories. And I would always try to foster a good professional relationship between myself and the readers, because I understand that the reader isn't just buying a character, they're buying myself, and they're buying a product that will allow them to have a relationship with me, the publisher. So I understand that when you're out here and you're publishing books, you need to foster a good relationship with your readers, and you need to foster a very good relationship with those readers in order to have them spread the word about your product, because this is a straight line as related to a relationship. And sadly, many in the comic book industry, they're not really understanding that it's a straight line. They're so desperate to try to pander to what they believe are new audiences of readers, like what Marvel is doing right now with their what they call social justice books, and DC is doing right now with their social justice books. They're pandering to audiences, not understanding relationships between the reader and the customer are not built through pandering. They're built by presenting a quality product, and they're built by forming relationships with those readers who have spent money on your books. I know for a fact that when you go out here and talk directly to your readers like I do on social media, it creates that relationship that is positive, and you need that positive relationship in order to build the word of mouth that will generate your sales. And you do that by, again, forming a trust between yourself and the reader. And this is something the comic book industry desperately needs to do, because if the medium is going to survive, you need to go out here and build trust between yourself and the reader, and you need to let them know that yes, there are oftentimes transformation arcs in the stories with these characters, but your favorite characters are not going to be constantly changed the way DC does with its reboots of its universe, or Marvel does with its relaunches of its titles. Because if you go out here and continue to do these types of actions, what this does is it alienates the reader, because they can't trust that the book that they're buying will be canon. And since they cannot trust that the book that they're reading will be canon, they have no incentive to go out here and pick up the book or tell their friends about the book. So these reboots that they're doing, they do damage to customer trust, And when you do damage to customer trust, what happens is that your sales wind up dropping because people don't trust you to continue to remain consistent as related to your product. And when they don't trust you to remain consistent as your product, they just have no incentive to go out here and buy it. Now, I have worked on the SJS Direct Imprint on building trust. I mean, I've gone from, in 2009, publishing one book and working with hand-drawn covers, and to working with comic artists, to designing covers and working with different types of stock photos. But the whole thing is that even as I have struggled, I have always been transparent and open and continued to form a relationship with readers. And the whole point of the relationship was so that readers could know that even though the company is just starting out, you will continue to see, one, an increase in quality, and two, you will see continued consistency as related to products. So when people see consistency, they know that they can trust that the product will be good, and they know that if you're trying to continuously improve the product, you're going to continue to keep things consistent. And when they know that things are consistent and they can trust it, they know that they don't have to worry about you changing up anything. And again, in comics, it's like a comfort product, and people need to be comfortable knowing that these characters are going to remain the same. And if you want to do new characters, you do new characters, but you don't go out here and break the trust as related to old characters. And that's what a seasoned editor would tell anyone. You want to maintain the trust as related to your old characters, and you want to continue having that there, because that's going to keep people buying your product. So this is important trust, but the whole thing is our modern day comic book industry really doesn't understand the concept of trust, because we have a lot of people who want to go out here and think about it as just a business, but the business of comics is very personal to the reader, and you have to form a personal relationship with every reader when you go out here and publish your product. So that's something that's really missing from this business, is trust. And if we don't get trust, you're not going to have that foundation for the strong sales that the industry had back in the late 80s and early 90s, because everybody could trust that the books were going to remain consistent, because they trusted that the characters were going to remain consistent. This is what gave people incentive to buy comics, and this is what gave people incentive to collect comics. And if we don't go out here and work towards rebuilding trust, there may not be enough readers to be able to sustain the medium for much longer, the publishing medium as related to the divisions of a Marvel or a DC Comics. And many independent creators really need to really think about maintaining trust, because this is how you go from having a Kickstarter to winding up on the shelves of a comic book store. Because if you keep your characters consistent, if you keep your relationship with your readers strong, you can have the same audience that Marvel and DC have thrown away. Because if you can go out here and keep that trust in as related to your relationship between the reader, they'll have the faith to continue buying your products and the faith to continue sharing your product with their friends. So trust is a very important variable in comics, and it's one that is not really appreciated for what it is, and it's one that people in the publishing business, in the comic publishing business, take for granted. But as a publisher myself, I understand how important trust is, because if you want to get this industry back in a competitive place, you have to rebuild the trust between the reader and the publisher. Now, if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to pick up some of the comics on the SJS Direct Imprint, like East-Team No Good Deed, you can find that comic on Kindle for 99 cents. And my first comic, full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, will be coming to Kickstarter soon. And until then, you can pick up all of the action-packed fantasy fiction on the SJS Direct Imprint, like the ISIS series, the East-Team series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spinsterella trilogy. You can find all those books in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis Legacy. The sorority secrets of the goddess next door are revealed in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get Isis Legacy in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere.